Good evening, everyone. I'm gonna make some more of these silly little lanterns. Not quite sure why, because they weren't a big success at the craft show today. This is a piece of honey locust. And you can see, we can bring things in a little closer. You can see what I'm doing. I just have a roll set. I'm gonna drill, that's a little crack. That's the top, so that'll be okay. Set it like 1 5/8 inches. Interesting, it's got a notch right where you should draw. I just got these. And it's kind of a Black Friday thing. It was on Amazon. Looks like we can solve that problem. Switch it end for end. We'll flip it over. No. Well, that's weird. It all starts on the same end. Hmm. Oh well. We'll just deal with it. We'll get it close enough to the center. So mark from the bottom up the 1 5/8 inches all the way around. This piece is 2 1/4. So half of that's 1 1/8 inches. Now I guess we'll get to see how accurate these are. This is really the only part of this that accuracy is kind of your friend. So that's making a sort of a fat line, but we'll be able to get close enough to the center. Whoa. What did I do there? Well, I must have my fat finger somewhere. Oh. That block did not come out as square as what it looked. That's interesting. Guess we'll find out what that's going to do for us. They'll be able to find a center point on that, so that should be okay. That's just a simple layout. Now we'll take it over to the drill press and drill it. I'm not going to drill that one just yet. I have another one that's already partially on its way. And I probably will go back and drill that one. So I have one, and this one is ash. So I had the bright idea that what if we, since it's ash, and that's honey locust would be the same way. What if we took in two things we could do to it? We could just dye it black, or we could burn it. I'm not going to burn this one tonight, just by virtue of I'd have to do it outside, and since our time changed, it's dark. And I don't have such a thing as a camera outside either. So, first step, like I said, I drilled the 4 holes, put it between centers, made it round. That's as far as what we've gone. So now we get to drill the holes up through it to get started. And I don't even worry about truing up the outside at this point. I mean, it's fairly true. It's not. It's not super accurate, and it's probably still has. I think there's still maybe not. A lot of times there's usually a little flat area on them yet. And what I found with doing these, or any of this kind of stuff, when you're drilling an end grain, it's quite difficult. So I have this big ugly drill bit that I got at a public sale. So it's not the world's greatest at this point. but it's good enough. I could, and probably should, put a little bit of a cone in there so that it has a place to go. So we'll just take our gouge and we'll put a little cone down the middle first. That'll sort of help center that big old bit up, hopefully. At this point, we're not really too worried about that anyhow. Slower speed down, because it is a big bit. I do have a mark on it. Hopefully that mark is still good. As you can see, it's sort of taken away some of that center point. Then I'll lose my mark. If I drill too deep with that one, it's really not the end of the world either. Like I say, it's just to get rid of a little less material for the big bit, because now I'm going to drill 1 3/8 inches up through the middle, which the T-lights that I have, that's what I need to drill. And then we'll have to expand it out a little bit after that. So it just makes it a little easier, at least a little easier on the drill bit, since we are drilling in strictly in end grain. We'll make it a little bit more friendly to the drill bit. Here's where I sort of need to be a little bit careful, because now it's going to remove the rest of that in the middle. It likes to bounce it around a bit. And we'll go up into the top just a little bit, not a lot. It's ash, dusty. That's pretty much all the drilling that we have to do to it, which is a plus. The other drill bit actually burn a little bit up in there. So maybe we will address that a little bit once we get to that point. But now I'm going to make the T-light fit. And I do have one. Let's stick it on. Pretty sure I had one down here, but you can never know. So we'll go to our trusty scraper. We want to be at center or even slightly above with that one. It's not a negative rake. This thing is sharpened the whole way down this edge. Seems to be very forgiving, and I'm only taking a little bit of material out, so so far it has worked well for me. I can't say that it has worked well on the very end. whenever switch over, you can be able to see both pieces both ways. Be able to see the drilling. Very little of that. If I go out a little bit, I have to move that camera now and mess things up. Not really overly exciting stuff to see. More interesting to see what I'm doing on the end. This piece is a little bit longer. Actually, it's considerably longer than most of them. It shouldn't chatter for me. We're just making little itty bitty cuts. We're just cutting in the side grain. So it's not really a hard cut. What I'm after is to get the T-light to fit. It doesn't need to be, we're not looking for the golden friction type fit, because I will glue them in. So now I can just I can plunge straight ahead. And get up in there about where we think we need to be. I want the whole T-light to go up in. These dumb T-lights have little knobs, little nibs on the bottom of them. As you can see, I never managed to go overly straight. Or they're sawdust. Or all the above. Even though you're looking straight down across and the ways of the bed, I don't seem to get it quite perfectly straight. But that's a fairly good distance to try and make something perfectly straight. We still don't have quite enough out. Like I say, I want them to be able to slide up in there. So there we are. And we need to go up just a little bit more because the little nubs are just about sticking out. So we got our fit, so all it is a matter of slide up there and go up another little bit. Not a lot. I don't necessarily need a lot. It's actually more than. And then I look on the inside. I've been trying to go up a little bit further on them to make sure that whole flame type thing, I guess you would consider it, so that more of that is showing in the top. I can always take more off of the bottom anyhow. I think I'm going to go up just a little bit more. I don't want to go up so far that I can't have a little ledge for it to stop against up there. So that should be far enough up that way. While we're here, go back overhead because everything else now is strictly looking straight down. And then we can come inward so you can see, you get a good view. You can see the same thing that I see basically in this. But what happens with these, and it doesn't seem to make a difference if you drill too deep or not deep enough. It doesn't seem to make a difference. It leaves a little like valley in there in the middle of that. Maybe I should try and drill shallower, but either way, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. I don't think. I think it's just as easy, and it's more fun, more challenging, of course. Is I'll go in here with basically this is a hollowing tool, sort of. Just a little. This is a negative rate, so I just go in there and round that up. And I am literally looking at the same thing you are, because I am looking down through the hole. Yeah, right. No, thank you. So I try and get these. Goes to show that I didn't necessarily get this one perfectly centered either. So I try and make sure I catch all of them and give it a little bit of a round in there. I will sand at it later, but of course that's sanding by hand. So if I can cut a little bit of it, it makes life a little easier. And be very gentle. There's a lot of tool hanging over, and it's sort of probably really not necessarily the totally the right tool for that, but it works. So we got all them rounded, and now we can, before we move on from there, we might as well reach in there and sand a little bit. I don't get super carried away in there on the sanding part. I don't necessarily feel it's super important. I do want to get rid of all the fuzzy kind of stuff. So I normally just sand with 180, maybe 220, and that'll be it inside there. Because nobody can touch it, and as long as it's not super chewed up, you really can't see it anyhow. Just a matter of getting the fuzzies away from where we drilled and all that good stuff. So that's kind of it for the inside. Because no matter what I do, I just generally leave the inside alone. Probably if you really want to be fancy, you could maybe reach in there with a paintbrush or something. That would be something I would have my wife do and try and paint in here. But I don't see that it's necessarily worthwhile for that. So now we can bring our live center back up. And I do have put a cone on the live center. Kind of a disposable kind of a cone, if you want to say disposable. It's made out of resin. Because I will cut once I'll round all this stuff back down, and I will undercut this, and I will actually touch that cone. So if it was the metal one that you paid good money for, then you're going to cut into it. And I don't. The resin one is cheaper, more disposable. So that's the way I do it. So there is still some flat on it. So we got to get everything, at least this bottom end, down to a round cylinder so that we can proceed on with it. Just use a spindle roughing guide. Just watch where you stick your fingers. You want to stick your fingers on the hole. You want it to be pretty much the same plane the whole way across. Not that that's actually super important. Just have to make sure we've hit everything we have. I think this one actually might be a good candidate to try the color and grain fill on it. There's a lot of big grain right there. So that's going to bring up the next subject of, I have been putting 3 beads down here. I will still do 3 beads. It might make it challenging. I've never really tried the grain fill on things with beads on it. So that could make it, that could actually make it more difficult, but we'll soon find out. So I'm going to cheat on the beads, as somebody told me last week. I have the D-Way beading tool, so I'm going to use the tools at my disposal. I'm not going to go start right on the very end, though. I'm going to come in just a little bit because I want to cut some more of that off on the end. So I just come in a little bit and I'll make my 3D. Nice and quick and easy. Makes very, very, very good uniform beads. One of the keys to using the beading tools is you need to mark them all and then go back and cut them. Otherwise, you won't get back in the same. You won't be able to line them up as well. So we'll make sure. Some woods don't necessarily like the beading tools as well. Especially like on side grain like that. It does look like it chewed them up a little bit. Not drastic, and we're going to grain fill them. It'll just give it a little bit more of a rustic look. Not to mention, really looking for to make sure I got a full bead. I should have put a, and that one doesn't, actually none of them do. The ideal way is to actually put like a pencil line or something right down the middle. Because it's almost very difficult to tell when you get to a full bead. And this tool really won't go beyond that full bead. So let's put a pencil mark on there. Let's see. See whether we're at center. I'm going to speed up some more. Speed does help these very much. And that was the problem. We didn't have quite the full bead, so it was leaving a flat. It's just a matter of wiggling them back and forth. When I get to the full bead, then I lift the handle a little bit and it becomes like a negative rake scraper. It seems to clean up that pop a little bit, just a little bit better for me. So now we have full beads. Whether they're any smoother than what they were. Like I say, a lot of that's the open grain part. Most people that are doing like the basket of illusion and that stuff, they never use an open grain wood because the open grain doesn't always cooperate with what they're doing. Now we'll go back to our spindle gouge. Get rid of that last little bit in there. And then we can undercut this. Like I said, that's why the sacrificial cone on the live center, because it did touch it. And I always do. In order to be able to cut that cleanly without breaking anything off, breaking any grain off. And we'll check it to make sure we could be undercut just a little bit more. When I make too many lines in there, then I'll just retrue the cone up again. Put the beading tool in a little too soon. Forgot I need one more. So I need one up here on the top. They're about 5/16. Try and make them even. Once again, I don't know that it's necessarily a critical kind of a thing. Yeah, it's just hard on the pencil. If we got enough of a line, we'll be able to see, get the right size beading tool. So that's our base, and the two, this will be the roof, and this will be the base down here. So we need to reduce the diameter of the center point down to something more. And I usually make, I've been making them a little bit rounded. I think they look a little better that way. So we'll pick up what most wood turners say is the nightmare tool, and we'll do that part usually with the skew. Make sure that it's sharp first. Couple swipes across the diamond hone. Tool rest height is up above, at least at center, if not above. And then we'll make nice little itty bitty cuts. And we sort of start in the center, even though I don't necessarily have a center line. And we'll take some down both sides. You can't get too aggressive with the skew. But it will, if you get fairly proficient with it, it will save a lot of time sanding. So that end's down to the bead. We just need to get the other end down to the bead. And we'll stop and see whether we got a nice gentle curve. Got some little buzzers on there, but that's okay. Cutting fairly cleanly, relatively cleanly. So all I need to do is get rid of them little whiskers. We'll do that with the long point of the skew. And just go right down along the side of the bead, like there's some on both sides. And the other thing, the roof style that I've been using has a V groove up here, so we'll make that now as well. Lots of other fancier tools to do that with, but if you're comfortable with the skew, that the V cut down into that little groove is just kind of the cat's meow in a way. So I think I'm going to take and clean up a little bit of that while I'm here, and then we'll sand that, and we'll probably put some, this might be the interesting part on when to do. I normally sort of finish these sort of almost in stages. So nice and smooth. Should be nice and cleanly cut. Not always, but normally. So let's give this a little bit of a sand. That I will have to turn my dust collector on for. That's, don't want to breathe too much dust. And I might as well just start with all fresh paper. Make life easier. We should be able to start with 220. I don't think there's anything that I did that would require me to go any lower than that. Probably could even go a little bit higher, maybe. I round off this little ledge on the inside of that as well. Make sure this bottom bead has a nice round corner where I went around the corner. And I won't touch the beads until I get to like 400. Because they're already very cleanly cut. Probably could start out even lower or higher right there on that part, but I find if you start out too high and you have to go back, then you've wasted more time anyhow. So a trusty paper towel, wipe off the dirt. You can see it doesn't, wouldn't want to get your fingers wrapped up in those holes because they are sharp. And sort of choose the paper towel up. Light pressure, using the cut end to get in right up against the edge, which works quite well. So 400. At 400, I might touch the top of these, go just across with the very top of them. And at 600, I'm going to use the cut edge, and I'm going to stick that down into the groove, and I'll just roll it over across the bead. That's pretty much all you need to do with these, with the beads. Of course, we'll see if we put some dye and some grain filler on there. That's the wonders of using any of the grain filler stuff. You got to be very vigilant on your sanding. Can't have any torn grain or any kind of disturbed grain of any kind, because the grain filler will fill that and show. Of course, generally the only people that's going to know that that's what that is another wood turner. That's that part. Anything we're going to do here, we gotta break this corner of these holes because that hole is very, very sharp right now, inside and out. So I need to do that before I proceed on. But you need to do that by hand, of course. And I'm doing it with 400 paper. I don't want to distort the clean, crisp edge that's there. I should have. I sand the inside of them a little bit. Also, why I like the inch and an eighth hole rather than the inch, because this little drum don't fit inside of an inch because it is 1 inch already. I just go in there a little bit. Can't really even tell you what the grit of paper is when there. It's fine. Should have did that before I rounded the edges. Would have made more sense, but can't make sense on everything. Because now we'll have to go back and make sure they're all that sharp corner is gone. And these are not these are not something that's, what do you want to call it, fine art gallery kind of a piece. Kind of a little knick-knack to sit around and collect dust. So that's the outside. The inside of them's a little bit more challenging, especially when you got big fingers. But I just use a piece of sandpaper. This is cloth back sandpaper. If I get it down to closer down to the bottom, it usually cooperates and wants to sit still. And I just make sure those edges in there where I cut at are not necessarily super smooth, but at least they don't have any fuzzies or anything like that sticking up. And just makes them smooth to the touch. Not that anybody should really stick their fingers in there, but if there's a hole, somebody will stick their finger in it. I've never had anything with a hole that somebody didn't stick their finger in it for whatever reason. They just have a fascination with it. So we'll put some dye on it. Better go get a second glove. And of course, the ideal background color for any of the grain filling is black. It can be done with other colors other than black. Anything, it needs to be a dark color, put it that way. So we'll just take a paper towel, fold it up nice and neat, to try not to make too much of a mess. This is just a plain black dye, nothing else in it. It's trans-tint dye. Of course, the challenging part of any dye job is going to be to get it down there, but there's always ways around that because we could just dump a little bit down there and then gravity will take it around for us. At least most of the way. Could use a little itty bitty paintbrush or something too, maybe. So I guess now the real question is, can I be a good boy and only dye the outside part and not get it down in those holes, which the answer to that question is already no, because I already dripped a drop down in there. So I guess we'll make the holes black too. This is what you call an experiment, so I know this process works quite well on other stuff. I can't say that I've ever really tried it too much on something in a smaller scale like this. We also need to do a little bead up here. At least some of it anyhow. Probably be best if I did it all. Look for any little white spots. I could have sprayed this with some alcohol first too. A lot of times if I dye something, I will spray it with alcohol first, just so it opens the pores of the wood back up. That's something Jimmy Clues taught in his class, was you always sprayed it with the alcohol to get the grain, get the pores to open back up. It'll accept the dye better. So we're dyed. It is alcohol based. We're going to make sure we open this paper towel up, lay it over the edge of the trash can or over the edge of something so that it dries and we don't have a spontaneous combustion of any kind. So make sure we don't have any major amounts of excess. Give it a spin, stand off to the side. Since it is alcohol, it does not take but a couple seconds really to dry. Once again, if your name was Jimmy Clues, he would just get out his lighter and light it on fire. I particularly like my house better than that, so I don't do that. We haven't done anything on the inside, so not necessarily really planning on doing anything. Sort of figured on letting the inside white like it already is. So now we need to seal it. And probably ideally would be to actually fire up the compressor and get the airbrush out. But I'm just going to put a light Nice light coat of shellac. This is a de-waxed shellac. Not that that would make any difference on this. But just want to seal the outer part of the grain. I don't want to put it on so heavy that I seal the pores or the open parts of the grain. I just want to seal the outer parts. So like I say, it's a lot of times when I do this, I will take and use the airbrush, poor man's air sprayer. Does a really good job, I will tell you that. Simple job. Pretty inexpensive to use. I mean, his airbrush is like $20 from Amazon or Harbor Freight. I think Harbor Freight actually has the same one. They're not expensive at all. So that needs to dry a little bit. Actually, it should dry the whole way. So what we really could do would make it better would be to go ahead. I'm going to let that spin there a second. Get rid of my gloves. I'm going to go ahead and drill this honey locust one. And we'll make it round and get it to... These things here, I found that it's much easier to work on 2 or 3 of them at one time. At least 2. Because it makes... Some parts of it makes it a whole lot easier. So I'm going to use an awl. And I forgot to mark one. And the reason I didn't reset this and try and make an exact line is it's easier to make 2 lines, and you can always judge that little bit of distance between those 2 lines and be close enough. So if I make a point between them 2 lines, my awl is very sharp, has a nice sharp point on it. The brad point bit that I'm going to use to drill them, I don't need to set up a fence or anything like that. That little point will drop right in that hole. It makes it really simple and easy and quick. Would be better if this block was squarer than what it is. But nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and do it. Only a little piece of wood, so... Try this one. I won't drill quite as deep as I've been. We have another little block. And I will need to chuck. So we'll take that out. Let's set it off to the side for a minute. Get rid of the chuck. And this would make more sense if we were widened out a little bit. We just use one of the corner center finders. Seeing as how this block is not very square, we're going to mark all 4 corners, and we'll do the same thing we did with the awl. I'll just use the spring punch on this one because I want a little deeper. You can always find the center point for the 2 fatter lines, and of course the center point on the other one was actually right. See, that's the corner that's off. So we'll go back to not having the sacrificial live center on it. And now we'll just go back between centers. And we need a tenant on this end. So we'll put that end in. And get it centered up. We're no longer using a skew, so we need to tap that down a bit. Back to our spindle roughing gouge. Bring the speed up a bit. And we'll just nibble off the corners. Honey locust has a kind of funny smell to it. You can see the shadow. I can see a shadow line. I'm rather tall, so as I look down, I can see that it's not even close to being round because I can still see the shadow coming around. And we're going to find out in a big hurry, I'm sure, where they were off there. That's already hitting that hole, and that's the only place. So it's not going to be quite as accurate as what I want it to be. Whether it'll be hugely noticeable or not is another story. And now we're true, at least on that end, and on that end. Ooh. Well, this is going to be a failure all the way around. One of them holes is off. Oh, holy collies. How did I do that? Well, I thought sure I marked all of them at the same height. That hole there is a quarter of an inch higher than the other ones. I don't think there's any way of correcting that either. Especially now that it's round. I certainly can't drill a bigger hole. That looks like a serious design opportunity. That thing will be way out of whack. There's almost no point in going any further. I think that's his do-over. So we'll start over. We'll just cut another 5-inch block and start over and drill new holes, because that's, that little block can be used for something else, but them holes being that far off, is not going to work at all. I'm still trying to figure out why my block is out of square. So bear with me a short second. It's not always wonderful to cut a small block like this on a table saw. I'd be very careful. I gotta figure out where my square is. I guess we could do a birdhouse out of that. Those two faces are square. That's the square. What's the one that's not? Why? Okay, there's two faces. We should have a square block. I must have flipped that block the wrong way when I was cutting it. A birdhouse. It's pretty big around for a birdhouse. It's still 2 1/8. Be a pretty big fat birdhouse. But got possibilities, I guess. So let's go back and lay it out right. So 1 5/8. Must have been what I did. I think I screwed around and moved that for some reason. Okay. So we're now 2 3/16. Not very well. Less than the school. Not by much, but it was still less. Nothing compared to last Saturday. And actually, I think there was actually more other vendors bought from us than actual people that came to the show. But you always have the comical ones. And the people, you know the drill, it's women. I'm sure the one lady probably thought I was being a smart ass. The one painting of the wifeys. It's just a simple little thing, but she thought it was kind of neat, and she had looked at it pretty hard, and then she went around the end of the booth where the two screens were at, or the big screen, and was looking at other stuff. And while she was doing that, which was another vendor, she had already been over and looked at it like twice or three times. She come over and bought it before this lady walked back around the corner. The lady walked back around the corner and took one look. She goes, "It's gone." And before I could say, "You snooze, you lose," that's what come out of her mouth. And she said, "Well, I guess I didn't really need it then." And I'm like, call me a smartass, but I'm like, you go to a craft show like that, if you see something, you think you want it, you might want to buy it right then and there, because it might be one of a kind. You walk away and somebody else might come up and buy it, which is what happened to that lady. She wasn't too excited about it, but she's like, "I guess I really didn't need it then." I'm like, "I guess not," but so now that we get to start over, giving our shellac lots of time to dry, which is all good. Shellac generally takes like 15 or 20 minutes to dry. If I get too rambunctious with it, it'll cause me trouble. The mark centers again. Just kind of rinse and repeat. As you can see, the block is now actually pretty square, because all I'm doing is making a fatter line. So that generally means that the block is pretty square. So back to between centers. Yeah, the crowd never picked up, really. Even like from when you and Mom were there and left, there really wasn't much activity. We have it pretty much to a cylinder. Won't guarantee it's the perfect cylinder, but close enough. Put a tenon on it. Yeah, still flats on it, but that's okay. So we'll go back to our chuck. I didn't drill the holes as deep this time too. I wanted to see what for difference that was going to make for me. So I didn't get ahead of myself there. I want to make sure it was centered. It should be, but stranger things have been known to happen. So if I bring a tailstock up back into the center hole with the chuck a little bit loose, that should make it be pretty much perfectly centered. And now we can get ready and drill some holes. Just drill the holes and then we'll go back to the other one. This should be a good enough of a cone. A big drill bit is not necessarily drilling a spectacularly straight hole. It's the wonders of buying some of this stuff at a public sale is, I think this one here, I even actually cut part of the shank of the drill bit off because it was so chewed up from whatever somebody was doing with it. So I just cut part of it off and got up above where it was chewed up. I have to watch when I put it in the chuck because, or in the drill chuck because I can get up farther up on it yet, and then it will be tapered. But it does clean the chips out quite well, so that's a plus. Just trying to find my line. Not that it would matter if I went deeper. In some ways, I think it would be better in some ways to go a little bit deeper. It would make them a little lighter in weight. It would take more off of up underneath that roof. There's been a couple of them that actually was used a scraper and went up there and took some out too. Nobody's really going to flip it upside down to look at it, so. And if they do and they want to complain about something like that, then maybe they should just put it back down on the table and carry on, but. So now we'll go back to our 1 3/8. So by doing it this way, now this Forstner bit only has to drill cut about 1/4 of an inch of material. Which as you can see, it makes it a whole lot easier for the drill bit. Still cleaning out that center part, so hopefully we drilled deep enough. Because I know when I don't drill deep enough, and I have an idea I didn't drill deep enough, I'll show you the next, which is really almost more of a problem than drilling too deep. So we got the whole way up in there. See, now there's really more of a problem yet because now it left when you don't go quite deep enough, it left that little lip in there, which is rather challenging. I took a file on the first ones and such, and that was more work than what it was worth. So when we go back to that one, we'll just use the hollowing tool, and we will go up in there and cut some more out of that. But for right now, we're going to go back and play with some green filler. As you can see, there's still the little bit of the cone left down in there. If I wanted to be real fancy and fussy with them, I could reach in there with there I would only use the negative rake scraper and make that a little bit of a cone in there, but I don't know, it's kind of a toss-up really whether that's worth the extra work. You know, it's not like I'm getting hundreds of dollars for something that like this, so to me it really becomes an issue of time versus revenue on something. Somehow that doesn't look like I got it back in the chuck the same way I did. Not that it matters. Not better. So now we have color options, but we're going to use, I know the one I'm going to use. I'll also put both gloves on, be easier. I'm going to use the blue. I like this blue, and of course it's Chromacraft's blue that they no longer make. I want to get this used up because it's, I used it a couple weeks ago, and it's starting to get hard. I'll start where it's easy to do it at. And what I'm doing is forcing it down into the grain, into the open grain. Really didn't necessarily want to get it down in that hole. And of course the heat of your fingers is going to make it softer too. A little more complicated to do it on a small piece like this, but I think we'll get a pretty decent result out of it, I think, by the way it looks. I'm sure the interesting part's going to be to actually get down in the bottom of the bead. Let's see, I don't know why I was being fussy in there because I might as well go back and put a little bit in those. This is where you need fingernails. do everything, including the end. Probably could pick a different design than beads though. I mean, it might look interesting when we're done, but beads definitely makes it more difficult to get the grain filler down in there. It's probably going to make it much more interesting to get it back out of that groove too. I think we've basically got it covered. And we tore a hole in our glove. Means I'll have a blue fingernail. So I'll go back to our eye protection. Because we're going to spin it and then just gently go across the areas. Try and use the corner of the paper towel to get down in those grooves. See how we're doing. You can see, yeah, I think that these grain fillers, you really probably waste more than what you ever use, just by virtue of how you use them. But I'll fold the paper towel over. Just gently go across that part that's open. And then we'll get a clean bit of paper towel here. I don't necessarily want to go with the grain. Try not to go with the grain as much as I possibly can, because I can wipe the filler back out. But I want to try and get the majority out of these cracks. And if we rub too hard or whatever and get too much of it off, you can always go back and put a little bit more on. I think I left like a solid blue line down in them cracks, so I think that'll be okay. So once again, we're going to pull that one back off, pull that back off. I'll play around with the other one for another 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll come back to this one, because I should have another coat of shellac or whatever to seal this in, seal the grain filler in. Although, since everything else is going to be done up here, I probably can go ahead and finish this, I think. So we'll go back to a jam chuck situation. See how sloppy this one fits? Very. I had to recut that one for one of them I did yesterday, I guess it was. So just use a full thickness paper towel. What's up, dude? Good enough. Oh. The next difficulty is going to be I need to put tape on there. I have an idea that tape will pull that out. So, and just bring our live center back up to where we're going to give it support and keep it centered. I'm going to put a little bit of shellac on that and just do it while it's spinning. That way I'll be a little bit more gentle on it. This is where I would rather spray it on than to put it on by hand. That should do good enough. Give that a little spin. Get it to dry. And it is shellac, so I can actually burnish it dry up here. I'm going to pull some of the color probably back off, maybe. I hope not, but no, it didn't. And it's pretty well dry. Looks a little streaky down in there, though. Like I say, that. I'm being lazy. That right there is where the spray would do wonders. Whether it's shellac or whatever you can spray in your house. I certainly can't go grab a rattle can of lacquer and spray it in my house because I might have to look for a new residence or something or other because that stuff just sticks around forever. So now we're back between centers. So now we can rough things down and make the cone part the top. Close the drawer so we don't fill it with chips. We'll get back up to turning speed. And this is going to trying to figure out about where I want the end to be. Somewhere probably down about there. Could possibly have a longer. I haven't done any with a real long top on. So we could maybe do one with a fairly long top. And back to my 1/2 inch bowl gouge. Just makes it a little quicker, a little easier. The bowl gouge is going to let me make a lot bigger of a cut than the spindle gouge would be. And you can pretty much get the same. I can get pretty much the same curve because I don't need a real tight curve. And I like this sharp point up here to be a little bit below the bead. That would just kind of be my preference. And our bead somewhere up in about there. I think. And since this little block down here already has a tenon on it, I'll just take this down in front of it and not remove that. That way I'll have a little jam chuck at some point if I need it. We'll make a bead, a little ball. And if, I was gonna say, if we wanted to, we could actually make a little V groove down in there as well. Not sure that's a great idea, seeing as how what we're doing with it, but probably not a great idea. I'll just make that curve down into it rather than it's something sharp. Throw in a nice crisp corner at the bottom. Looks about right. Or it looks as good as we're going to get there. So once again, we're back to our favorite job of sanding. I do have a remote control ordered for the dust collector, so I don't got to keep walking back and forth. It won't be here till Wednesday or Thursday of this coming week, so next Saturday you won't see me walking over there to turn the dust collector on. Speed was too fast. The sandpaper was literally skating. If you look at the sandpaper, it's literally skating across that surface and not cutting it. So as soon as you slow it down, then you're cutting the wood. I'll sand as much of that bead as what I can. Now, just got to be careful of that edge back there. Not a good idea to touch that with the fingers because it will cut you. For sure. Because I will be able to break that free. I'll be able to cut that off and finish the last little bit just on that jam chuck and the tape. At least I have been able to so far. Of course, I have another thought that says that it might look kind of interesting if I left the top of it just naturally. But I'm sure my critic would say that would look dumb. Of course, she was also the same one that said one of the first ones I did, I didn't, it was really a pretty plain piece of wood. It didn't have the beads. It had two beads and a flat in between them. So I took and dyed the flat in between and then the roof. And of course, she said she didn't like that, but the first show that we took them to, that was the very first one that sold. So to each his own and all that good stuff. So now we can take this down a little bit thinner. I don't try and cut these the whole way through. I just find that that's a recipe for disaster. I will get it pretty small. Down to about there. We're down to about 1/8 of an inch, maybe, something like that. To me, it's just easier and certainly safer to take a little pressure off of it. Just take a flesh saw and saw it off. As you can see, it's wiggling back there because that's not the world's most secure grip. It's enough to hold it to do what I need to do. I don't know if this one is secure enough. I think it is. So if I take and put pressure on that side, I should be able to finish my cut. Very gently, and then we'll just sand it. There's nothing wrong with starting with 180 grit sandpaper to do this very end. Because we'll just sort of shape that a little bit with sandpaper, rather than trying to be really creative and keep making cuts. And the tape pretty much keeps it from wanting to walk off of there, but it still can. And you've got to this point, this far, so it's like, why try and be a hero and cut it off and have a jam in there, especially seeing as how that block was pretty big. There's usually only a little piece there. A little braver when it's a little piece. A little bit of sanding just to blend everything in on the front or the top. And that's it. I've been putting screw eyes in the top, but this one would be way too big around. They're way too heavy to put on a tree. This is going to be strictly a one that's going to sit on maybe sit on a fireplace mantle or a shelf or something along those lines. Get another glove. Since I already have a blue finger, I don't need a black. That blue stuff comes off easily. The black dye does not. Any of the dyes do not come off your hands very well. So we'll turn this black. We're doing as slow as it'll go, and we should be able to do that number there and put it on while it's spinning. And that should be our black dye. And we can sort of burnish it a little bit, help it dry just a little quicker. This one here will be much easier to do than the base voice because we don't have any holes. So we can go ahead and put our shellac on while it's spinning. That way we can get a nice, light, even coat. Like I say, we don't want to fill the grain up. We just want to seal it. I wasn't necessarily thinking along the lines of doing this kind of thing tonight, so next time I'll have more thought process will be a little bit better, and I'll have the compressor charged up and airbrush out and all that good stuff, which is the ideal way of doing it. This works, but the other thought I had on these, since they're ash, or even the honey locust one, is I could take a torch to it. I think that would have to be a little different design. That the roof would have to not have this sharp edge on because that'll just burn right off. But I actually do have a piece I can show you. I'll let that dry some more. That was done that very way. And it's really it's kind of an interesting thing to do when you burn them and you come back and fill the grain, because it not only has the same grain fill to it, but it now has major amount of texture to it. So that we could back out just a little bit, and that's basically the same thing as what I did here. The only difference is instead of dyeing this black, this was actually burnt with a torch, and it doesn't necessarily show you on camera, but you run your fingers across there. What burns is these lines down in here because that's softer grain, and you use a wire brush and brush them out. So this gives it a really kind of interesting look to it. This one's not quite finished. It needs the tendon removed down here, and all this just has shellac over top of that. So it gets a coat or two of some sort of a lacquer or something over top of that yet. And I've never really, can't say that I've ever really tried it on something such a small scale as these little lighthouse or little lanterns, but it would be worth a try. It's only a little piece of wood, so I have a good supply of that, so I'm not worried about that part of it. So dry. Dry is not, it's not, my fingers are not sticking to it, so it's dry enough. So we'll do the same thing we did with the rest of it. This will be a little easier because there's a whole lot bigger area to deal with than the smaller areas. So we'll do circles both directions to get the grain to fill up. And we can go back in closer to so you can see more so what we're doing. Hopefully not make you dizzy watching my finger going around in circles, but at least get the idea. There's lots of these grain fillers on the market. This is one I wish they still made because this one seems to work a little bit nicer than some of the other ones. It is an oil-based product, so you have to sort of keep that in mind a little bit. It does have a bit of an odor to it. I never could find an actual time on it. Oh, colors can be blended. Dries to the touch in minute, 4 to 8 hours to completely dry. That's generally, I'm sort of pushing it there, and I got some streaks in there from the shellac. So this will definitely is going to be the extent of what I do to this tonight. I'll come back to it another day and spray it. I'll let this grain filler completely dry. Also, this is one of the projects that's definitely an out for the super glue finish that I would put on natural wood. This will not work to put a super glue over top of that. It won't be able to soak in, and actually it will dissolve the grain filler. And that's learned by experience there, because I did it. I have a tool handle that I did this very same procedure to, and decided I should put a coat of the 3408 over top of it and sealed the wood and everything like that, but it also dissolved the grain filler. So it was one of them, what you would call a failure. But it was a learning curve. Learning experience. I'll just leave. One thing I've learned over the years is something like right there, there's streaks, and there's shellac streaks. So it's just like leave it all alone, let everything set up and cure overnight, next day, a couple days. In my case, it'll be a couple days, and that way I won't mess up things more than what it already is. That just slides off of there. And there's our blue lantern. We might have to do some touch up there because of how I did that, but this is easily touched up. I can go back over that and sand that a little bit once it's totally cured. And if it doesn't suit me, I could go back and put a little more black dye on there, can put more grain filler on there, right up until I actually spray it with, a spray-on type finish. But it does give you, it's kind of a little disappointing maybe down in here, but you can see with the lid is really, kind of really makes things stand out and pop. So if you do that on something, a bigger scale, whatever, a bowl, a hollow form or something like that, and you get the grain patterns on it, The wilder the grain patterns, the better it looks, of course. But so that's the short version of how you would go about doing a piece where you color it and put some grain filler on it. Anybody have any questions, comments, likes, dislikes? Lots of colors. I don't have a ton of different colors, but I have some purple, some blue, some green. Pink is probably the worst one that I have. I have yet to really get the pink to cooperate for me. So we could go back. What is it? 741. So let's go back to our honey locust one. Let's see if we can get this one to cooperate. So first order of business, to get the light to fit. And the scraper needs to be cutting on center or even slightly above. So there's where we start. We'll just make some little nibble cuts in here on the end. And the scraper is sharpened quite a ways back. So that's why I did that with that one. That's just a piece of Amazon steel, high-speed steel. So it's a pretty cheap tool to make. Takes a little bit of time, but not hours and days or anything like that. So we'll get that up in there far enough. Probably not quite far enough. They usually don't go straight enough either, as it's getting tighter. I don't want to jam one of them up there. That's when it becomes a little difficult to get it back out. The fingers are just only so big, and to reach in that hole and get it to come out. Still too tight. Goes in, but I'm not going straight enough, or them things are, well, I know what it is. Them things are actually a little bit tapered. It also feels like my burr is back on my scraper. There we go. Nice, gentle push fit that could go up a little bit higher yet. Interesting cut to sort of make in there. I can't see what the tool's doing on this side of it. I have to look over here to see the cut line growing or doing what it's doing. I think it'll work. So now, go back in here and hopefully get rid of those little things. The tool's not real aggressive in there. I mean, I'm sure it could be if you would kind of force things a little bit. It's just kind of being gentle. This stuff is kind of chippy there a little bit, but I could probably run the speed up a lot faster than what it is, but or put more of a little bit more of a burr on it. And I can actually do that with just a hone. It sort of will put a nice fine burr on there rather than running back to the grinder to regrind it. We also might, that's what I thought too, just a little bit low on the center line because it wants to be cutting on center. And you have a better view of it than what I do, because I am still looking down through the holes, but it's a little challenging to do that. So that's that. Now we can go back to our tail stock support. Our sacrificial cone goes back on. Our pretty sacrificial cone. That was an experiment on like 4 or 5 different colors in there in that cone. And now we're basically back to turning between centers. We're not totally round yet, so we need to get to be totally round. It's sort of our first order of business. At least in the areas that count. Oh, looks like we're round. It's very, very hard to actually cut across these holes without making a dip in them because there's so little material there. Did actually fairly good that time, but it's definitely challenging, especially with the bigger tool like that, to not sort of do more harm than good in that part. So that'll look all right. So back to beads, back to cheater beads. Stay in from the end just a little bit. Mark the first one. I can put the right hand leg in that groove, swing it around, and make the bead. I can make a little bit on each one if I want at a time. It doesn't really seem to me to make a whole lot of difference. What does make a difference is to have the line down the center so that we know when we get to that perfect bead. The line just about disappears. I lift the handle a little bit. It becomes more of just a scraper than a cutting tool. But that's gives you like a perfect bead every time. I mean, there's one of those tools that you say, well, And they're kind of expensive because, I mean, they are like $45 a pop, but, you know, to make perfect beads every time without spending a ton of time, to me, then that's something that's kind of worthwhile. And you use it enough, you sort of, there, I didn't draw the line, you sort of get the idea pretty quickly as to when you get to center on them. But the line still is never a bad thing to have to make sure what you're doing. Clean up the bottom. Another groove in the live center, but that's what it's there for. If you noticed, it stopped. That's when I know I touched the groove, touched the live center. And yes, it would do the same thing with the metal one, but then I would be putting a groove in it every single time, and it won't do that. So we'll take our center out. We'll go back to our skew to do that. Once again, you could do this with pretty much any tool. You could do it with a spindle gouge. A little practice with a skew doesn't hurt anybody. You just don't want to be aggressive. But you can run right down into that corner. It's not really a world-class catch waiting to happen. Because when you do have a catch with a skew, it is pretty exciting. Makes some really neat patterns. Not the kind of patterns you want, but does make some neat patterns. But it does make life kind of wonderful. There's a little bit of grain that it picked up. It's the only thing you run into is a little bit of grain directional stuff. Doesn't look like my curve is quite enough right there. So hopefully we can get back here behind that where it was chippy. Well, that actually sounds like it chipped it again. I'll make our curve just a little bit nicer. Not really. Oh, picked up a really nice, took a chip right out of that. So let's go back the other way. And it sounds like it's chipping up to beat the band going the other way. It's kind of one of the downfalls of some of this. It is. The bigger chunks yet out. a little bit of a like a grain direction change right there. You can also use our skew as a scraper. Now I might be able to go back and scrape that off and not have it chip. Didn't go deep enough. Don't look like it's chipping it any more than what it already is. So I think we'll keep on going at that rate. Now I've sort of made the whole thing flat. That's the one. But now I have no, that's going to cause me a little bit more sanding right there. But it also got rid of the chewed up grain. Now I just have to address these areas out here. And probably my simplest, easiest bet is just to continue to scrape it. And just blend those curves in a little bit right there. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. And then sort of everything is the same type of cut, so it'll be the same amount of sanding to do with it. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. The inside, the outside. I could just sand this little bit down here, because this is the only time I can get after that. The very end. So if I sand that to the grits, that'll be ready for finish. Because the rest of it, I can, once I flip it around the other direction, I can sand all that stuff at one time. I could probably even sort of cheat a little bit. Oh, I didn't sand in there, did I? Did not. There's a fuzzy in there. Forgot that. Sanding scratches would be one thing, but a big hairy looking fuzzy thing sticking out there wouldn't be too nice. So now we're just kind of thinking about how overly productive we should be. Normally with these, what I will do is finish sanding up to the bead or just beyond the bead, and then I'll actually put the finish on these before I move on. But it is 8 o'clock. So maybe we'll just stop and sand that, and we'll just call it quits at that. At that point, I'm going to put the dust collector back on. Because tomorrow is a work day. So just a longer strip of 220. Make it a little easier for that right there. Need a fresh edge to go up against the bead. I just trim a little bit off of it. That was 220, or yeah, 220, 320. I'm sorry, 320. And we did the end. 400. 600 will do the bead. Put the face shield down like you're supposed to instead of it being in front of the camera. Last but not least will be 800. And I've already used that edge. Wonderful to have a pair of scissors to cut the sandpaper without killing them, but don't ask me where I got them at, because I've had them for years. Okay. So we need a little strip of 400. To get inside here. And knock the fuzzies off. And that takes care of them. So we'll make sure we have a clean hole. And I had a little bit of something still hanging on there. That took care of it. Round over the outside. Which would probably almost be easier just to pull it out of the chuck and do it without it being in there. Might make it easier. I haven't tried that yet. I just want to make sure it's not a razor blade edge. Try and get all the dust out. Don't need that. So now we can actually finish this part of it. Okay. Clean glove. I don't want to introduce blue or black in there. I want it to be a natural color. We'll just take a paper towel and we'll fold it up pretty small. This one will get the Parfix 3408 on it, inside and out. Inside's just basically to seal everything up. So put, and I guess we're not too close. Back out just a bit. We'll put plenty on our paper towel because I'm going to reach inside. I'm not going to spin the lathe under power. We're going to do it all by hand. And I'm going to do, basically I'm just going to do the best job that I can in there. Most interested in around the windows. Because you almost can't get everything. And then I will come back out to the windows. Make sure we get them. Just get a fresher piece of towel. That's all. I'm not putting it on real heavy in there, so it's going to soak in. I don't really need to necessarily worry about wiping that off. Out here, it's going to be a different story because we're going to put plenty on. I'm going to dribble it right in those lovely bead grooves. We'll go across this nice and gently, and we'll get part of that bead up there. Putting plenty on. You don't want to be shy with it. We're going to rub it around. We're looking for total saturation is what we're looking for. We got 40 seconds to get our job done, so we're not in any big hurry to start wiping off the excess. I want to make sure everything's covered well. Clean my finger off. The other thing I could do with my finger, my finger on my glove is I could have actually put a little wax on there, just a little microcrystalline wax or something along that, and then the super glue doesn't stick to wax, so it won't stick to your finger, and you won't go through quite as many gloves that way. Now we're going to dry off the excess. Here's where we need to be vigilant. As you can see, I'm still using the same part of the paper towel. So I'm in a lot of ways, I'm just going from wet spots to dry spots. Then I'll get a dry piece of paper towel, or dry part of the paper towel, and continue to dry. Because I only want what's sitting in the grain of the wood, in the pores of the wood. I don't want it to be sitting on the surface. Because whatever would sit on the surface with this particular one, it will not be smooth. It will bead up. Look and make sure we don't have any runs in there with the one inside. That's funny though, because it actually looks like the beading tool sort of did a little bit of burning on there for some reason, or it's just, I don't know, it heated that grain up or something. Gives it a little character. So from there, even though my climate is, I could let that go, but I'm going to hit it with just one little squirt, 2 little squirts of activator. I shot up here so that the mist lands down on it, and that's ready to go. That part of it I could come back tomorrow and buff it to a nice shine. I do try and give it to 24 hours. I don't get in a hurry with it. That's another adventure you can watch. Buffing these are a little bit different. These holes are big enough that the buffing wheel wants to grab a hold of them if you're not careful. This is what I would normally do with them and stop at that point and take it out and do another one, do a different one. At least give this an hour or so to dry, to cure. Because if I go putting that on that jam chuck and if there's any of it that seeps back out of this area in here, it's going to be glued fast to the jam chuck or at best the paper towel. So it's just not worth being in a hurry. Because these are the kind of projects you're going to do multiple ones of anyhow. So it's just easier to be a little bit patient with it. And that's it. Anybody that wasn't here earlier, here's the one we did earlier. It's not quite complete yet either. This grain filler takes 8 hours. It has an 6 to 8 hour cure or a dry time. So this will have to dry for a day. For me, it'll be pour like maybe at best get back to it maybe Monday evening. But who knows what work is going to bring at us this week. We were rather busy last week, so can't imagine this coming week is going to be a whole lot different. So, anybody have any questions, comments? Feel free to ask. Otherwise, we're going to wrap things up here and call it a day. And And we will try and be back. Should be able to be back pretty much should be able to come back every Saturday evening now, I think. I think we're sort of craft showed out. At least in my opinion, I think we're craft showed out. So, other than that, I think we are going to call it a night. Why does that show big on that one? What did I hit on the way by? I hit the other view. There we go. See a lot of nothingness. But otherwise, that's about it for me. This is being broadcast on YouTube as well as Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could be so kind as to hit the subscribe button, it would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, stop back some other Saturday night. There's no worries here. But we'll see you then. As far as well, technically, she's not all wrong. It is a candle holder.